The lecture hall on Kepler 7 station buzzed with nervous energy. Students from 12 different species sat in curved rows, their various forms of eyes focused on the massive holographic display at the front of the room. The air recycling system worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric needs of so many alien beings. Professor Zextai stood at the podium, his 4 crystalline arms gesturing gracefully as he spoke. His species, the Altarians, were known throughout the Yar galaxy for their scientific minds and careful research. When Professor Zextai spoke about dangerous creatures, everyone listened. "Today we discuss the apex predators," Professor Zextai announced, his translator converting his crystalline voice into the common galactic language. "These creatures represent the greatest threat to civilized life in our galaxy." Lisa Morgan sat in the back row, her human form small compared to most of her classmates. She had been the only representative from Earth at the Galactic Academy for 6 months now. Most of the other students barely noticed her. Humans were new to space travel, and many species considered them primitive and uninteresting. The first hologram appeared above the professor's head. It showed a large 4-legged creature with thick fur and sharp teeth. Its eyes glowed yellow in the artificial light, and its muscular body suggested incredible strength and speed. "The Canidae of Fenris Prime," Professor Zextai said with obvious fear in his voice. "These pack hunters destroyed 3 separate colonies before we learned to avoid their territory completely. They hunt in groups, using advanced tactics that rival military strategies. Their bite can crush bone, and their speed allows them to outrun most ground vehicles." Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The vegan delegate, Ambassador Krelon, made a soft whimpering sound through his gill slits. His people had evolved from prey animals, and images of predators always upset them. Lisa tilted her head slightly, studying the hologram with interest. The creature looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place why. The second hologram replaced the first. This one showed a sleeker creature with retractable claws and bright green eyes. Its body was built for stealth and sudden attacks, with powerful legs designed for jumping great distances. "The Felidae of Zerion 4, Professor Zextai continued. "Perhaps even more dangerous than the Canidae. These solitary hunters can leap incredible distances and climb any surface. Their claws can cut through most standard armor, and they seem to enjoy playing with their prey before killing it. The Zerion government has been fighting a losing war against them for over 50 years. More nervous sounds came from the audience. The insectoid hive queen Zarath clicked her mandibles rapidly, a sign of extreme anxiety in her species. Lisa frowned, looking more closely at this second creature. Something about its proportions and the way it held itself definitely seemed familiar. The third hologram showed several snake-like creatures, each one longer than a ground vehicle. Their scaled bodies rippled with muscle, and their eyes held an alien intelligence that made even the bravest species uncomfortable. "The Serpentis of the Outer Rim," Professor Zextai said. "These creatures can grow to enormous sizes and possess strength enough to crush a starship's hull. They are patient hunters, sometimes waiting for months to strike at the perfect moment. Their venom can kill most known species within minutes." Lisa leaned forward in her seat, studying each hologram as it rotated slowly above the professor's head. The more she looked, the more familiar they seemed. "These apex predators," Professor Zextai announced with dramatic emphasis, "represent the pinnacle of evolutionary killing efficiency. They have no natural enemies, no weaknesses that can be exploited, and no mercy for those unlucky enough to encounter them. This is why we must always avoid their territories and never attempt to study them closely." The professor gestured to his final hologram, which showed a map of the galaxy with large red zones marked across it. "As you can see, these danger zones make up nearly 15% of known space, areas where no civilized being should ever venture." Lisa raised her hand slowly. The movement caught Professor Zextai's attention, and he paused in his lecture. "Yes, Miss Morgan?" he asked. Most professors had learned her name simply because humans were so rare in galactic academic circles. Lisa stood up, her voice calm and clear. Professor, I don't want to interrupt, but those creatures you showed us, they look exactly like our pets back home on Earth. The lecture hall fell completely silent. Not the normal quiet of students paying attention, but the dead silence of shock and disbelief. Every alien eye in the room turned to stare at Lisa. Professor Zextai's translator made several strange sounds before finally producing words. I'm sorry, Miss Morgan, my translator seems to be malfunctioning. Could you repeat what you just said? Lisa remained standing, looking around at all the staring faces. I said those look like our pets. The first one looked like a wolf, which is basically a wild dog. The second one looked like a big cat. And the third one looked like some kind of snake. We keep smaller versions of all of those as companion animals on Earth. The silence stretched longer. Ambassador Krelon's gill slits fluttered rapidly as he tried to process what he had heard. Hive Queen Zareth's clicking had stopped entirely, which in her species indicated either death or complete psychological shock. Professor Zexthai's forearms trembled slightly. Miss Morgan, are you suggesting that humans live with these apex predators? Well, not exactly those ones, Lisa said, still speaking in the same calm tone. But very similar creatures, yes. My family has a golden retriever named Max. He's a type of dog. And my neighbor has 3 cats. Mrs. Henderson down the street has a python, though most people think that's a bit weird. A low moan came from somewhere in the middle of the classroom. One of the Altarian students had apparently fainted, his crystalline body making musical sounds as it hit the floor. Professor Zexthai gripped the podium with all 4 hands. Miss Morgan, I think there has been some terrible misunderstanding. The creatures I showed you are responsible for the deaths of millions of beings across the galaxy. They are not pets. Lisa reached into her bag and pulled out her personal datapad. Would you like to see some pictures? I have lots of photos of Max and the neighborhood cats. The entire back row of students suddenly stood up and moved to seats farther away from Lisa. She didn't notice, busy scrolling through her photos. Here's Max playing fetch in our backyard, she said, holding up the datapad. And here's him sleeping on my bed. Oh, and this is Whiskers, Mrs. Garcia's cat. He likes to sit in sunny spots by the window. Professor Zexthai stared at the images on Lisa's datapad. His translator fell silent for several long moments before finally producing a single word. Impossible. The chaos in the lecture hall was unlike anything Professor Zexthai had experienced in his 40 years of teaching. Half his students had moved as far away from Lisa Morgan as possible, while the other half craned their necks to see the images on her datapad. The air recycling system struggled with the sudden increase in stress pheromones from a dozen different species. Ambassador Krelon had turned a pale shade of green and was making rapid clicking sounds with his throat sac. His species used this as a distress call, though none of the other students seemed to know how to respond to it. 2 draconian students near the front had their weapon hands twitching, an automatic response to perceived threats. Miss Morgan, Professor Zexthai said carefully, his forearm still gripping the podium. Perhaps you could show these images to the entire class? I believe my colleagues would be very interested in seeing them. Lisa walked down the center aisle toward the front of the room. With each step she took, more students shifted away from her path. By the time she reached the professor's podium, there was a clear circle of empty seats around her position. Here, you can connect my datapad to your hologram projector, Lisa said helpfully, offering the device to Professor Zexthai. I have hundreds of pictures. The professor took the device with one of his crystalline hands, being very careful not to touch Lisa's fingers. He connected it to the projection system with movements that were slower and more cautious than usual. The first image appeared above their heads, 30 times larger than life. It showed a large golden dog with its tongue hanging out, sitting in what was clearly someone's backyard. The dog's tail was wagging and its eyes held an expression of simple happiness. A collective gasp came from the students. Several more Altarian students fainted, their crystalline bodies creating a musical crash as they hit the floor. This is Max, Lisa said cheerfully. He's 3 years old and loves playing fetch. He also knows how to shake hands, roll over, and play dead. Oh, And he helps my little sister with her homework by keeping her company. Hive Queen Zarath made a sound like breaking glass. In her species, this indicated complete mental breakdown. You allow this apex predator near your offspring? Well, of course, Lisa said, looking puzzled by the question. Max loves children. All dogs do, really. They're very protective of human families. Professor Zexthai changed to the next image with a shaking hand. This one showed a small orange cat curled up in a sunny window, fast asleep. And this is Whiskers, Lisa continued. He belongs to Mrs. Garcia next door. He's getting old now, maybe 15 years, but he still likes to chase the red dot when Mrs. Garcia plays with him, using her laser pointer. One of the vegan students stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward. You use military-grade laser weapons to torment these predators? Lisa blinked in confusion. No, it's just a toy, a little red light that moves around. Cats like to chase it because it triggers their hunting instincts. It's completely harmless. Hunting instincts? Ambassador Krelon whispered, his gill slits flapping with terror. You deliberately activate their hunting instincts? It's good exercise for them, Lisa explained patiently. Indoor cats need mental stimulation and physical activity, or they get bored and overweight. The next image showed a large python coiled peacefully in a glass habitat. Several students immediately stood up and headed for the exits. Now that's Mrs. Henderson's python, Sammy, Lisa said. He's actually really sweet. Mrs. Henderson lets me pet him sometimes. His skin feels like smooth leather, and he's always warm from his heating lamp. Professor Zexithai's translator produced a series of random sounds before managing to form words. You voluntarily make physical contact with serpentous creatures? Well, Sammy's just a ball python, Lisa said. They're not dangerous to humans. Some people think snakes are scary, but they're actually very calm animals. Sammy spends most of his time sleeping under his favorite rock. A commotion near the back of the room caught everyone's attention. The emergency communication system was flashing, indicating an urgent message. Professor Zexthai activated it with one of his free hands. The hologram of Dean Rexmar appeared next to Lisa. The Dean was a centaurian, with blue skin and silver eyes that normally showed great wisdom. Today, those eyes showed barely controlled panic. Professor Zexthai, Dean Rexmar said quickly, we've been monitoring your lecture through the standard recording system. Are we to understand that the human student is claiming her species domesticates apex predators? That appears to be the case, Dean, Professor Zexthai replied weakly. I need to contact the Galactic Defense Force immediately, Dean Rexmar said. If humans can control apex predators, this changes everything we know about their species. Are there any human military representatives on the station? Lisa raised her hand. Actually, Captain Jake Williams is here. He's Earth's military advisor to the Academy. Should I call him? Dean Rexmar's silver eyes went wide. There's a human military officer on this station, with access to apex predators? Well, Jake has Scout with him, Lisa said casually. Scout's his service dog. Jake lost his leg in a training accident a few years ago, and Scout helps him with balance and mobility. Plus, Scout can detect medical emergencies before they happen. The silence that followed was so complete that the station's life support systems seemed loud in comparison. Miss Morgan, Dean Rexmar said very slowly, are you telling us that humans use apex predators as medical assistance devices? Service dogs are pretty common on Earth, Lisa said. Some help blind people navigate, others detect seizures or low blood sugar. Scout is trained to help with physical stability and emergency medical response. He's incredibly smart. Professor Zexthai looked at his datapad, then at Dean Rexmar's hologram, then back at Lisa. Miss Morgan, I think it would be very helpful if Captain Williams and his service creature could join us for the remainder of this lecture. Lisa pulled out her communication device. Sure, I'll call him. Jake loves talking about Scout, as She made the call. The remaining students in the lecture hall looked at each other with expressions of growing horror. They were beginning to realize that they had been sitting in a classroom with a member of a species that not only survived encounters with galaxy's most feared predators, but had somehow convinced those predators to work for them. The implications of this revelation were only starting to sink in. and already several students were quietly sending emergency messages to their home governments. Something told Professor Zextai that this was going to be a very long day. Captain Jake Williams arrived at the lecture hall 15 minutes later, moving with the confident stride of someone comfortable in military settings. His prosthetic leg clicked softly against the floor with each step, but what drew every alien eye in the room was the large German shepherd walking calmly beside him. The moment Scout entered the room, pandemonium erupted. The remaining Vegan students scrambled over their desks to reach the exits. 3 more Altarian students fainted, in perfect musical harmony. Hive Queen Zarath began making a continuous high-pitched whine that sounded like a malfunctioning computer. Scout, completely unaware of the terror he was causing, sat down next to Jake and looked around the room with mild interest. His tongue hung out slightly, and his tail gave a few friendly wags as he noticed all the attention he was receiving. "Easy, everyone," Jake said in a calm voice, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Scout's completely harmless. He's been through extensive training." Ambassador Krelon, who had pressed himself against the far wall, managed to speak through his gill slits. "Training? You train these apex predators?" "Well, yeah," Jake said, looking puzzled by the question. "Scout here knows about 40 different commands. He can open doors, retrieve dropped objects, call for help, and even detect when I'm about to have a blood sugar crash. Watch this." Jake pulled a treat from his pocket and held it above Scout's head. "Scout, sit. Stay. Roll over. Play dead." The German shepherd performed each command perfectly, ending by lying on his side with his tongue hanging out. To the alien students, it looked like a massive apex predator had just willingly made itself vulnerable on command. The silence was broken by a soft thudding sound. Dean Rexmar had apparently fainted, his hologram flickering as his communication link was automatically severed. Professor Zextai found his voice first. "Captain Williams, could you explain to my students exactly how humans manage to control these creatures?" Jake looked at Lisa, who shrugged and gestured for him to continue. Scout remained lying on his side, occasionally thumping his tail against the floor. "Control isn't really the right word," Jake said thoughtfully. "It's more like partnership. Dogs have been working with humans for thousands of years. We bred them from wolves, selecting for traits like loyalty, intelligence, and cooperation." "Bred them?" squeaked a Centaurian student near the middle of the room. "You mean you deliberately manipulated their evolution?" "Sure," Jake said casually. "Humans have created hundreds of different dog breeds. Some are tiny enough to fit in your pocket, others are big enough to carry a full-grown human. Some are bred for hunting, others for protection, others just for companionship." Lisa activated her datapad again, projecting new images above the classroom. The first showed a tiny chihuahua sitting in someone's lap, no bigger than most alien species' hands. "This is what we bred some of them to become," she explained. "Completely harmless companion animals." The next image showed a massive Great Dane standing next to a small human child. The dog's head was level with the child's shoulders, but the child was hugging the dog's neck without any sign of fear. "And this is the other extreme," Lisa continued. "Great Danes are gentle giants. They're actually called nanny dogs because they're so good with children." Ambassador Krelon made a strangled sound. "You allow your offspring to embrace apex predators, larger than themselves?" "Dogs are pack animals," Jake explained. "When they accept a human family as their pack, they'll protect that family with their lives. There are thousands of documented cases of dogs saving human children from danger." Professor Zextai's translator was struggling to keep up with the rapid conversation. "Let me understand this correctly. You're saying that humans took the galaxy's most feared apex predators and convinced them to protect human children?" "That's a pretty good summary," Jake agreed. He reached down and scratched behind Scout's ears. The German shepherd's tail wagged faster, and he rolled onto his back to get belly rubs. The sight of a human casually touching the stomach of an apex predator caused 2 more students to faint. Lisa's communication device chimed with an incoming call. She accepted it, and a new hologram appeared in the room. This one showed Dr. Amanda Price, a xenobiologist calling from Earth. Lisa, I got your emergency message, Dr. Price said. Is it true that the galactic community has been living in fear of dogs and cats? Hi, Dr. Price, Lisa said cheerfully. Yes, apparently they think Max and Whiskers are deadly apex predators. Dr. Price blinked several times, then began laughing. Oh my. Well, I suppose from an evolutionary standpoint, they're not wrong. Dogs and cats are incredibly efficient predators, but humans have been living with them for so long that we forget how dangerous they could be. Professor Zexthai found his voice again. Dr. Price, perhaps you could explain to my students how humans achieve this impossible domestication? Dr. Price's expression became more serious. It wasn't impossible, just gradual. Humans have an unusual capacity for forming emotional bonds with other species. We also have excellent pattern recognition and empathy skills. When early humans encountered wolves, instead of just seeing them as threats, they saw potential allies. She gestured off-screen, and a small tabby cat jumped into her lap. Several alien students gasped as the deadly Felidae began purring loudly. This is Mittens, Dr. Price said, stroking the cat's fur. She showed up at my door as a kitten 6 years ago, and I've been taking care of her ever since. She's an excellent companion and a very effective pest control specialist. Pest control? Asked Hive Queen Zarath, her voice shaking with confusion. Cats hunt small rodents that eat our food supplies, Dr. Price explained. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. We provide them with shelter and regular meals. They keep our storage areas free of vermin. Jake nodded in agreement. Same with dogs, really. They help us hunt, guard our homes, and provide companionship. In return, we take care of all their needs and give them safe places to live. But, Professor Zexthai said weakly, these creatures have killed millions of beings across the galaxy. Wild ones, sure, Jake admitted, but the same could be said about humans in our early history. The difference is domestication and socialization. These animals learn to see humans as family rather than prey or competition. Lisa showed another image, this one of a dog park where dozens of different breeds were playing together while humans watched nearby. This is a typical weekend afternoon in any human city, she explained. Hundreds of apex predators, all living peacefully with their human families. The room fell quiet as the alien students tried to process this information. They were beginning to understand that they weren't just dealing with a species that had survived encounters with apex predators. They were dealing with a species that had turned those predators into beloved family members. Scout chose that moment to get up and walk over to Ambassador Krelon, who had been making distressed sounds. Throughout the entire presentation, the German shepherd sat down in front of the terrified Vegan and gently placed his head on the ambassador's lap. Ambassador Krelon froze completely, certain he was about to be devoured. Instead, Scout closed his eyes and began making a soft, contented sound. He likes you, Jake said with a smile. Scout can sense when people are upset. He's trying to comfort you. Ambassador Krelon looked down at the apex predator resting peacefully in his lap, then up at the humans who were treating this situation as completely normal. For the first time in galactic history, a Vegan began to understand that maybe, just maybe, predators weren't always the enemy. Within 6 hours of the lecture, news had spread throughout the entire Galactic Academy and beyond. Emergency communications were flooding in from governments across known space, all asking the same basic questions. How many apex predators did humans control? Were they planning to use them as weapons? And most importantly, why had nobody known about this before? Lisa found herself in the Academy's main conference room, surrounded by holographic projections of some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Admiral Rextor of the Draconian Empire dominated one corner of the room, his scaled face showing barely controlled anxiety. Chancellor Vexhai of the Altarian High Council occupied another projection space, her 4 arms gesturing frantically as she spoke with her advisors. Captain Jake Williams sat next to Lisa, with Scout lying calmly at his feet. Dr. Amanda Price had traveled from Earth and arrived on the fastest transport available, bringing with her additional documentation and video evidence of human-animal relationships. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Admiral Rextor said. his deep voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding fleets. Your species has been living with these apex predators for thousands of your years? About 15,000 years for dogs, Dr. Price confirmed. Cats have been with us for roughly 9,000 years. We also keep birds, reptiles, fish, and various small mammals as companion animals. Chancellor Vexhide leaned forward in her projection. Dr. Price, my military advisors informed me that the Canadae of Fenris Prime have been classified as a Class Alpha galactic threat. They destroyed 3 of our colonies before we established the quarantine zones. Are you seriously telling me that humans keep these creatures in their homes? Lisa pulled up a video on her data pad and projected it for everyone to see. It showed a family barbecue in someone's backyard, with children running around while several large dogs played fetch and chased frisbees. This was taken at my aunt's house last month, Lisa said. She has 4 dogs. The biggest one, Rex, weighs about 90 pounds and loves playing with her grandchildren. The silence that followed was broken by a soft whimpering sound from one of the smaller holographic projections. Ambassador Yiltar of the Zarian government had been listening quietly, but the implications were clearly overwhelming him. Miss Morgan, Ambassador Yiltar said carefully, for 50 years my people have been fighting a war against Felidee attacks. They've destroyed entire cities. Our military has never found an effective way to stop them. Are you suggesting that humans could help us? Dr. Price nodded slowly. It's possible. The key is understanding that what you see as senseless aggression might actually be territorial behavior or hunting instincts gone wrong. If we can figure out what's driving the attacks, we might be able to address the root cause. Commander Steve Rodriguez, Earth's liaison to the Galactic Defense Force, spoke up from his position near the back of the room. The problem is that most species approach predator problems with military solutions. Humans learned a long time ago that you can't fight nature successfully. You have to work with it. Admiral Rextor's expression grew more serious. Commander Rodriguez, with respect to your species' achievements, the Draconian Empire has some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. If we can't stop these creatures with force, what makes you think your domestication techniques would work? Because force is exactly the wrong approach, Dr. Price said firmly. Predators respond to aggression with more aggression. They see military attacks as territorial challenges, but they also respond to signals of non-aggression and cooperation. She activated another video, this one showing her own research work with feral cats near her laboratory on Earth. The footage showed her slowly gaining the trust of a group of wild cats through patience, food offerings, and respect for their space. This took 3 months, Dr. Price explained. But by the end, these completely wild cats were allowing me to provide medical care and even relocate them to safer territories. No weapons, no force, just understanding and patience. Chancellor Vexhide exchanged rapid communications with her off-screen advisors before speaking again. Dr. Price, the Altarian High Council is prepared to offer significant resources to study your domestication techniques. We have several worlds that are completely uninhabitable due to apex predator populations. We'd be happy to help, Dr. Price replied. But you need to understand that this isn't a quick fix. Domestication takes generations. What we can offer immediately is conflict resolution and coexistence strategies. A new holographic projection appeared in the room. Queen Mother Zexalin of the hive spoke in her species' characteristic harmonic tones, which the translators rendered as overlapping voices. Humans of Earth, Queen Mother Zexalin said formally. The hive has monitored this conversation with great interest. We wish to understand, do you believe your domestication abilities extend to all predator species, or only to specific types? Lisa and Dr. Price looked at each other before Dr. Price answered. We honestly don't know. Every species is different. What works with dogs might not work with the creatures you're dealing with, but the basic principles of trust, respect, and mutual benefit seem to be fairly universal. Jake leaned forward, Scout raising his head to look at his human companion. The important thing to remember is that domestication isn't domination. We don't control our animal companions. We form partnerships with them. They choose to work with us because we provide something they value. Such as? Admiral Rextor asked. Safety, regular food, medical care, companionship, Jake listed. In Scout's case, he gets all of that plus the satisfaction of doing important work. Service dogs are happiest when they have a job to do. As if to prove the point, Scout stood up and gently nudged Jake's prosthetic leg with his nose. Jake checked his blood sugar monitor and nodded approvingly. He just reminded me to check my glucose levels, Jake explained to the room full of alien representatives. They were getting a little low. Scout detected it before I did. Ambassador Yiltar leaned forward in his projection. Captain Williams, would it be possible for a human team to visit Zarian 4? We're willing to try anything at this point. Our military solutions have failed completely. I'd have to check with my superiors on Earth, Jake replied. But I think we could put together a team of experts. Animal behaviorists, veterinarians, maybe some professional animal trainers. Dr. Price nodded enthusiastically. I've been wanting to study alien predator species for years. This could be an incredible opportunity for interspecies cooperation. Chancellor Vexhigh's projection flickered as she received another urgent communication. When she returned her attention to the conference, her expression had changed dramatically. Dr. Price, I've just received a report from our xenobiology department. They've been analyzing the data from today's lecture, and they've reached a startling conclusion. She paused, her forearms moving in what Lisa had learned was the Altarian equivalent of nervous fidgeting. According to our analysis, humans may be the only known species in the galaxy with the psychological and social traits necessary for large-scale predator domestication. Your combination of empathy, pattern recognition, social bonding instincts, and cooperative behavior is apparently unique. The conference room fell completely silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Admiral Rextor was the first to speak. Are you suggesting that humans are uniquely qualified to solve predator problems that have plagued the galaxy for millennia? That appears to be exactly what our scientists are suggesting, Chancellor Vexhigh confirmed. Lisa looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at her, then down at Scout, who was lying peacefully at Jake's feet without a care in the world. Suddenly, humanity's place in the galactic community had changed forever. 6 months after the lecture that changed galactic history, Lisa Morgan stood at the edge of a Zarion 4 forest, watching something that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. A massive Felidae, easily twice the size of any Earth, cat, was cautiously approaching a simple metal bowl filled with specially prepared food. The creature moved with the fluid grace that had terrorized Zarion colonists for decades, but its body language was different now. Instead of the aggressive hunting posture that military reports always described, this Felidae showed curiosity and cautious interest. Easy, big guy, Lisa whispered, staying perfectly still as the enormous cat sniffed at the bowl. Nobody's going to hurt you. Behind her, Ambassador Yiltar watched through high-powered binoculars, his hands shaking with a mixture of fear and amazement. 6 months ago, the sight of a human standing so close to a wild Felidae would have been grounds for immediate military intervention. Now it was part of an official diplomatic mission. The Felidae began eating from the bowl, its massive head nearly as large as Lisa's torso. She remained motionless, letting the creature get used to her presence without feeling threatened. Phase 1 complete, she said softly into her communication device. Subject is accepting food offering without aggression. Dr. Amanda Price's voice came back through the comm unit from the research station 2 kilometers away. Excellent work, Lisa. Remember, don't try to make contact yet. Let him finish eating and leave on his own terms. The Human Domestication Institute had become the most sought-after organization in galactic space almost overnight. What had started as Lisa's accidental revelation in a classroom had grown into a full-scale diplomatic and scientific initiative involving dozens of worlds. The Zarion 4 mission was their third major project. The first had been a complete success on Altarian Prime, where feral Kennedy had been relocated away from populated areas using humane methods. The second, on a draconian border world, was still ongoing but showing promising results. Jake Williams emerged from the forest behind Lisa, moving carefully to avoid startling the feeding Felidae. Scout walked beside him, his service dog training keeping him calm and quiet despite the presence of a creature that could easily kill them all. The Felidae looked up at the approaching humans and dog, but didn't stop eating. This was remarkable. Progress. 3 months ago, any Felidae on Zarian 4 would have attacked immediately upon seeing humans. "How's he doing?" Jake asked quietly. "Better than expected," Lisa replied. "This is the 4th time he's accepted food from us. I think he's starting to associate humans with positive experiences rather than threats." Ambassador Yiltar lowered his binoculars and walked over to join the humans. The Zarian diplomat had lost most of his initial terror over the past months, though he still maintained a healthy respect for the dangerous creatures. "Miss Morgan, my government is amazed by the progress you've made," he said softly. "Our military commanders thought you were insane when you first proposed this approach." Lisa smiled, still watching the enormous cat. "A lot of people on Earth thought the same thing when we first started domesticating wolves 15,000 years ago. The key is patience and understanding." The Felidae finished eating and sat back on its haunches, beginning to groom itself with a tongue the size of a human hand. The casual, relaxed behavior was something no Zarian citizen had ever seen from these creatures. "He's beautiful," Lisa said admiringly. "Look at that coat pattern, and the way he moves is just incredible." Jake nodded in agreement. "Reminds me of the big cats we have in zoos back home. Same family, just adapted to a different environment." Dr. Price's voice crackled through the comm again. "Lisa, we're getting some interesting readings from the remote sensors. The Felidae's stress hormones have dropped significantly over the past month. Your approach is definitely working." The success on Zarian 4 was already attracting attention from across the galaxy. The Vegan Confederation had formally requested human assistance with their predator problems. The Hive wanted to establish a permanent exchange program to study human domestication techniques. Even the usually isolationist Centaurian Republic had quietly inquired about human expertise. What surprised everyone, including the humans themselves, was how much the galaxy's predator problems had in common. Whether it was overpopulation due to lack of natural prey, territorial disputes with expanding settlements, or simply fear-based aggression cycles, the same basic principles seemed to apply everywhere. The Felidae stood up and stretched, showing off muscles that could crush a vehicle. Then, in a gesture that made Ambassador Yiltar gasp, it began walking directly toward Lisa. "Stay calm," Jake murmured, his hand moving instinctively toward Scout's harness. "Let him come to you." Lisa remained perfectly still as the massive predator approached. The Felidae stopped just out of arm's reach and sat down, studying her with intelligent golden eyes. "Hello there," Lisa said softly. "You're quite the handsome fellow, aren't you?" The Felidae tilted its head slightly, a gesture that was remarkably similar to domestic cats back on Earth. Then, in a move that would have been impossible to predict 6 months ago, it began to purr. The sound was deeper and more powerful than any Earth cat could produce, but it was unmistakably the same contentment vocalization that Lisa had heard from Whiskers and thousands of other cats throughout her life. Ambassador Yiltar's jaw dropped. It's purring. "Just like cats back home," Lisa confirmed, fighting the urge to reach out and pet the enormous creature. "He's telling us he's comfortable and non-aggressive." Dr. Price's excited voice came through the comm. "Lisa, are you recording this?" The purring behavior was never documented in wild Felidae. "Before now. Getting it all on video," Jake confirmed, his camera capturing every moment of the historic encounter. The Felidae continued purring for several more minutes, occasionally blinking slowly at Lisa in what any cat owner would recognize as a sign of trust and affection. Then it stood up, gave what looked remarkably like a nod, and disappeared back into the forest. Lisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Phase 2 complete. We've established non-threatening contact and received positive social signals. Ambassador Yiltar was staring at the spot where the Felidae had disappeared. "Miss Morgan, in 50 years of conflict, no Zarian citizen has, ever been that close to a wild Felidae and survived to tell about it. The difference is approach and intent," Lisa explained. Your people have been treating them as enemies to be destroyed. We're treating them as neighbors to be understood. Jake packed up his recording equipment while Scout performed a quick security sweep of the area. So, what's the next phase? Lisa checked her notes on her datapad. We continue building trust. Maybe start bringing some of the cubs to the research station for socialization work. If we can get one generation comfortable around humans, the behavioral change might become permanent. As they walked back toward their transport vehicle, Ambassador Yiltar shook his head in amazement. You know, Miss Morgan, 6 months ago my people thought humans were a minor species with no significant contributions to galactic society. And now? Lisa asked. Now we're beginning to understand that you might be the key to solving some of our oldest and most dangerous problems. Ambassador Yiltar paused, looking back toward the forest. The galaxy is a much more interesting place with humans in it. Lisa smiled as she climbed into the transport. Through the window, she could see the research station where human scientists were working alongside alien researchers, sharing thousands of years of domestication knowledge with species who had never imagined such cooperation was possible. Year ago, she had been just another exchange student trying to understand her place in a vast galactic community. Now she was helping to reshape that community's relationship with the natural world. As their transport headed back to the research station, Lisa's communication device chimed with a message from Earth. The Galactic Academy had officially established the Department of Interspecies Domestication Studies, and they wanted her to be the first department head, Professor Lisa Morgan. She liked the sound of that. Behind them in the forest, a deep purring sound could be heard echoing through the trees, as if the entire ecosystem was beginning to relax for the first time in decades.